She's the one I want.
Clara Boone stood near the dusty church steps, clutching her shawl as a hot wind pushed grit across the yard. Her sister's wedding guests gathered in confused clusters while the bride ran down the road, lifting her white dress to flee as fast as she could. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. She ran again, someone whispered. Can't blame her, another muttered. Clara lowered her gaze, hoping no one looked her way. The sheriff, a broad man with a smirk, nudged Clara forward. Well, now, he drawled, looks like the rancher's still standing here without a bride. Maybe he should take the heavier one. Laughter burst around her like snapping whips. Clara's breath caught, and she stepped back, but her feet felt buried in the dust. Elias Hart stood at the edge of the church porch, tall and quiet, his hat shadowing his eyes. He didn't laugh. He didn't even smile. He simply watched Clara, as if trying to understand the sharp pain tightening her shoulders. "Leave her be," he said softly. The sheriff waved him off. "Come on, Elias. Girl's right here. Might as well take her." More laughter rose. The guests enjoyed the joke too much. Clara whispered, "Please don't." She wanted to disappear into the old boards beneath her shoes. Elias stepped toward her. "You all right?" His voice was low, gentle in a way that confused her. She shook her head. "They're just having fun. Doesn't look like fun to me." The sheriff snorted. "She's strong enough. You won't break her." The joke drew another round of cruel chuckles. Clara flinched. Elias turned to the sheriff. "You done?" "Not yet," the sheriff replied. "Town deserve a show." Clara whispered, "Please stop. I didn't ask for any of this." A woman near the front barked, "Better her than my girl. Rancher should be grateful she's even standing here." Clara's cheeks burned. "I'm going home." "No, you're not," the sheriff said, blocking her path. "Not till we settle this embarrassment." Elias lifted his head. "Embarrassment for who?" "For all of us," the sheriff snapped. Bride ran off, groom still waiting. "Somebody needs to fix it." Clara swallowed hard. "I'm not a fix." "Never said you were," Elias murmured. The sheriff pointed at Clara. "Step up there." Clara froze. She saw people watching, smirking men, whispering women, 2 children giggling behind their mother's skirt. Every cruel memory she carried pressed against her chest. Elias moved between her and the sheriff. "She doesn't have to do anything." Sheriff chuckled. "What, you want her?" Clara felt the world tilt. She stared at Elias, waiting for him to laugh it off, to deny it, to step away and leave her alone in the dust. Instead, he looked at her, long enough that she had to look down. "You scared?" he asked. "Yes," she whispered. "No need to be." Clara shook her head. "You don't know what they'll say." "I do," he replied. "Doesn't matter to me." The sheriff spread his arms. "Well, go on then, Elias. Say it plain. Town's waiting." Clara's hands trembled at her sides. She felt every stare like a hot brand. She wanted to disappear into the earth, to run like her sister, to hide from their laughter. She expected Elias to step away. Instead, Elias faced the sheriff. "Sheriff," he said slowly, "she's the one I want." Gasps cut through the crowd. The laughter died as if the wind itself had stopped. Clara's heart thudded hard, too loud in her ears. "What?" the sheriff barked. Elias nodded toward Clara. "You heard me." Clara's voice wavered. "Why would you say that?" Elias met her eyes. "Because they're wrong about you." The sheriff scoffed. "You can't mean that. Girls." "Enough," Elias said. His voice finally sharpened. "You push her again, and we'll have a real problem." The crowd murmured. A few people backed away. Clara whispered, "Please don't fight over me." Elias answered, "Nobody's fighting, just telling the truth." Sheriff stepped closer. "Elias, you sure about this? Town talked for months." "Let them talk." Clara stared at Elias, searching for mockery, but found none. His expression stayed steady, unreadable but sincere. A thin older woman hissed, "Foolish man. Could have had a proper bride." Elias turned toward her. "A proper bride is one who's treated proper." Clara's breath hitched. She didn't know whether to trust him or fear the weight of his words. The sheriff folded his arms. Then it's settled, I guess. No, Clara said, barely audible. None of this is settled. Elias stepped close enough for her to hear only him. You don't have to go anywhere with me. I just didn't want them hurting you more. Clara looked at the church doors, the dusty street, the cruel eyes around her. They always hurt me. Not while I'm here, he said quietly. The wind lifted her shawl. Clara's heartbeat trembled. I don't understand you. You don't have to. Just know I meant what I said. The sheriff raised his voice. So it's done then. Clara's hands tightened. She wasn't sure if Elias had saved her or trapped her in another storm. As the whispers rose again, Elias faced the crowd and repeated, clear and unshaken, she's the one I want. Clara felt the world shift. She still didn't know if he meant kindness or something else entirely. She only knew the moment would change everything. Clara felt the wind shift. Clara stepped off the church porch with her head bowed, dust rising around her boots as whispers chased her down the steps. The sheriff marched behind her and gave her a sharp shove toward Elias. Go on. He claimed you, he said. Best news you'll ever get. Her mother folded her arms. Don't drag your feet, Clara. This is the closest you'll come to future. Clara's hands shook as she whispered, please don't say that. Elias moved closer. She walks on her own, he said. The sheriff smirked. Fine, but she's going with you. Clara looked up at Elias. You don't have to take me. You don't have to stay here, he replied. That's all that matters. Her mother scoffed. Don't pretend you have choices, Clara. Clara's voice cracked. Mama, please. Elias gently touched the reins of his horse. If you want to leave, I'll take you. No one here will stop us once we're past the road. The sheriff barked. You planning to run off with her? Planning to give her space, Elias answered. Clara blinked. Why would you do that? Because you look like you need it. Her mother hissed. Don't expect kindness where it doesn't belong. Clara stepped away from her. I'll go. Elias nodded once and offered his hand to help her mount. Take your time. I haven't ridden in years, Clara said. I'll lead the horse. You just hold steady. She hesitated, then climbed up, gripping the saddle horn as the leather creaked beneath her. Elias placed a calming hand near her knee. Easy. You're all right. The sheriff called out, Don't bring her back crying, Hart. Elias didn't respond. He simply clicked his tongue, guiding the horse forward. Clara kept her eyes fixed on the long dirt road stretching out of town. The sun lowered behind a ridge, burning orange through thin clouds. After several quiet minutes, Clara whispered, You shouldn't have spoken for me. Elias walked beside the horse, his hand steady on the reins. Didn't speak for you, spoke against them. They'll twist it. They always do. I know. She looked down at him. Why didn't you laugh with them? Didn't feel like it. You don't even know me. I can see enough. The wind lifted her shawl again. You must think I'm weak. No, I think you're tired. Clara swallowed, surprised by the truth of it. I didn't want trouble. You didn't make any, Elias said. They did. She studied the back of his coat as he walked. You don't stare like the others. Nothing to stare at except someone who's hurting. Her breath shook. I didn't ask you to fix anything. I'm not fixing anything, he replied. Just giving you distance. The horse trotted gently as they moved through sagebrush and open land. The quiet around them felt strange, soft in a way that almost frightened her. Clara tightened her grip on the saddle. They'll say awful things about you. They say awful things about everybody. That doesn't bother you? Only bothers me when they hurt someone who doesn't deserve it. Clara looked toward the dimming horizon. I still don't know why you did it. Elias walked a little closer. Did what? Said you wanted me. He paused. If I'd stayed silent, Sheriff would have kept pushing you in front of that crowd. I wasn't letting that happen. So it wasn't real? He lifted his eyes to hers. Kindness is real. She looked away quickly, unable to hold his gaze. I don't know where you're taking me. Just a ranch. Nothing more. How far is it? Not long. You'll see the lantern soon. She nodded, breathing slowly. I don't want to be a problem. You're not, Clara whispered. I'm afraid. I know, he said. The road widened into an open stretch of land as the first lanterns glimmered across the fields, small golden circles swaying gently in the evening wind. The Hart Ranch lay ahead, barns casting long shadows across the dirt. Clara stared at the lights. It looks peaceful. It can be, Elias said. You live alone out here? Ranch hands stay most seasons. Cook lives in the back house. They're good folks, mostly. Mostly, she asked softly. Some talk too much, he admitted. But they work hard. Clara smoothed her skirt nervously. What will they say when they see me? Doesn't matter, Elias answered, though his expression tightened. It matters to me. He looked up at her. Then I'll deal with it. As the horse approached the ranch gate, Clara felt a prickle along her neck. Lantern light revealed dark shapes near the fence. 3 ranch hands leaning against the rails, whispering to one another, their faces half hidden in the glow. One lifted his chin. Who's she? He murmured. Another chuckled under his breath. Clara's heart pounded. They're watching. Elias stepped closer to the horse. Stay near me. Clara clutched the saddle as the whispers drifted through the warm night air, sharper than any knife. They had reached the gate, and the shadows waited. The Hart Ranch sprawled across the horizon, the late afternoon sun dusting the fences and barn roofs in gold. Clara's boots crunched over the dry earth as she followed Elias through the gate, her heart thumping against the shame she carried from town. She expected snickers, remarks, maybe outright ridicule. Instead, silence followed her, broken only by the soft murmur of horses and the distant call of cattle. Here, take this, a young voice said. Clara looked down to see Sam holding a tin cup of water. His eyes met hers briefly, free of mockery. Thank you, Clara whispered, her hands trembling slightly as she took the cup. She drank carefully, noticing the steady gaze that treated her like a person, not a spectacle. Sam shrugged, turning back to horses. Don't mention it. Everyone needs water. A door creaked behind her, and an older woman emerged, apron dusted with flour. Clara, dear, she said gently, offering a folded blanket. You look like you've walked through fire. Rest a bit. Clara accepted the blanket, warmth seeping into her chilled arms. Thank you, she murmured, voice soft and uncertain. You've been through more than most, the woman continued. It shows, but don't let it weigh you down. Martha's kindness was strange to Clara. No laughter, no jeers, just care, simple and steady. She folded the blanket over her arms, feeling its softness against the rough fabric of her dress. Elias cleared his throat. Clara, I have a room ready for you in the loft. Quiet, away from the work for now. He led her toward the barn, lanterns flickering on either side of the doors. Dust motes danced in the light. Clara climbed the ladder into the loft, each creak under her weight echoing in the high wooden space. Elias followed and gestured toward a small bed with fresh linens. You can stay here tonight, he said, voice calm and firm. Take your time. No one will disturb you. Clara's lips pressed together, unsure how to respond. She lowered herself onto the bed, folding the blanket around her shoulders. The air smelled faintly of hay and polished wood, a stark contrast to the crowded church and the stifling town streets. She started, then stopped. Her throat felt tight. Words had failed her all day. Elias simply nodded and left the loft, his boots barely making a sound on the ladder. The barn door closed with a soft thud. Clara was alone, yet she didn't feel fear. She allowed herself to breathe, the silence thick but comforting. Her gaze fell on the lantern hanging from a beam. Its light spilled across the room, warm and forgiving. She traced the pattern of its glow on the floor, marveling at how gentle it seemed compared to the harsh sun of the town. Clara hugged the blanket tighter and sank into the mattress, the tears she'd been holding back finally slipping free. She cried quietly, not from terror but from relief. For the first time in years, there was no laughter at her expense, no cruel whispers, no judging eyes. She felt the tension in her shoulders ease, the tightness around her chest slowly unraveling. She pressed her face into the blanket, breathing deeply. The smell of hay, the warmth of the linens, and the lantern's glow created a cocoon she hadn't known she could have. For a moment, she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, a place like this could exist for her. Outside, Sam and another ranch hand, Duke, argued in low voices. Their words drifted faintly up the ladder. "She doesn't belong here," Duke muttered. "Why not?" Sam asked sharply. "She's worked harder than most. You saw how she handled the horses." "Doesn't mean she fits," Duke replied. Clara's ears burned. Part of her wanted to shrink back, hide under the blanket, pretend she hadn't heard. But another part of her, the part that had endured years of scorn, listened carefully. She had been unwanted before, but here she had allies. She had kindness. She wiped her tears on the blanket, noticing how her hands no longer shook as violently. She folded the blanket neatly on the bed, then ran a hand along the wooden wall, feeling its smoothness. Even the rough edges were comforting, a reminder that strength could come from quiet things. Martha's earlier words echoed in her mind. "Don't let it weigh you down." Clara took a deep breath and let the warmth of the lantern fill her chest. She no longer felt the sharp pang of humiliation she had carried since the church steps. Instead, she felt something new, a cautious hope, fragile but insistent, like the first green shoots after a long drought. Her eyes traced the barn loft's rafters, the flickering shadows stretching across the floor. She allowed herself to imagine mornings with work, laughter with Sam and Emily, evenings with Martha's quiet companionship, and moments with Elias that carried understanding without judgment. The ranch, she realized, was a soft shelter she had not expected. It was not loud or demanding, but firm and steadfast, offering space for her to breathe, grow, and heal. For the first time in a long while, Clara felt a sense of belonging, a place where her worth could exist without apology. As night deepened, the barn creaked under the wind, and the lantern's glow flickered gently. Clara lay back on the bed, pulling the blanket around her shoulders again, her eyes heavy but peaceful. Outside, the voices of Sam and Duke continued, faint arguments that no longer held power over her. She closed her eyes and let herself rest, letting the soft shelter of the Hart Ranch embrace her completely. Clara woke early, warmed by the soft glow leaking through the thin curtains. The ranch house was quiet except for clinking pans in the kitchen. She smoothed her dress, took a steady breath, and stepped into the hallway. Martha stood at the stove, stirring a pot of oats while two ranch hands drank coffee at the table. "Morning, dear," Martha said with a smile. "Could use an extra pair of hands, if you're willing." Clara nodded. I can help peel potatoes." Before Martha replied, Duke leaned back in his chair with a smirk. "Well now," he drawled, "that's a heap of potatoes for a heap of a woman." The other hand coughed, trying not to laugh. Martha's wooden spoon froze midair. Clara's face flushed hot as old memories punched through her, laughter behind her back, whispered insults, cruel eyes. She lowered her gaze. I didn't mean to be in the way." Duke chuckled. "You ain't in the way. You're the way." Clara's hands trembled around the bowl. Her throat tightened, her breath shallow. Every cruel word she had ever heard seemed to land all over again. Then a calm, low voice cut through the room. "That's enough." Duke stiffened. Everyone turned. Elias stood in the doorway, shoulders broad, hat shadowing half his face, his expression unreadable. Duke swallowed. "Just making conversation." "That's not conversation," Elias said quietly. "That's disrespect." Duke scoffed. "She's just—" "I said enough." Elias stepped forward, his boots slow, deliberate, not angry, not loud, just steady, like a man used to being obeyed without force. Clara felt the air shift. Elias didn't raise a hand, didn't lean in, didn't threaten. He simply placed himself between Clara and Duke, a wall of quiet strength. Duke stood, jaw tight. "You taking her side?" "I'm taking the side of decency." Elias's voice never changed. "Leave the kitchen." For a long second, no one moved. Then Duke pushed back his chair and stomped out the back door. Silence settled. Martha exhaled. "Goodness," she murmured, patting Clara's arm gently. "Don't you listen to him. That boy's mouth runs faster than his common sense." Clara tried to speak, but her voice wavered. "I didn't want trouble." "You didn't cause any," Elias said. He walked to the counter, picked up a knife, and began cutting apples as though nothing unusual had happened. Clara studied him. His movements were careful, almost thoughtful. The morning sun caught the edge of his hat, but the rest of his face stayed shadowed, making it hard to read him fully. "I'm sorry for bringing problems," she whispered. Elias shook his head. "You didn't bring anything but yourself." He kept slicing. "This ranch sees travelers pass through all the time. You're welcome here." "Even if the town says otherwise?" she asked softly. Elias paused, set the knife down, and finally looked at her. A flicker of something, weariness, maybe, crossed his eyes. "Town doesn't decide my choices." Martha hummed in agreement. "Nor mine." Clara held the edge of the counter, grounding herself. "People talk," she said quietly. "They always talk." "They talked about me, too," Elias replied, returning to his apples. "Still do." That surprised her. "About you?" "You run a ranch this size alone long enough," he said, "and folks come up with stories to fill the spaces they don't understand." Clara stared at him, absorbing that. She had always felt alone in judgment. Knowing he carried whispers of his own softened something in her chest. "I don't want to be a burden," she said. "You're not." His voice didn't waver. "You can stay as long as you wish." Clara blinked rapidly, trying to steady her breath. "Why?" she whispered. "You don't even know me." Elias didn't answer right away. Instead, he wiped his hands and leaned against the counter, studying her with quiet patience. "You look tired," he finally said, "and scared. Nobody should face the world with no place to rest." Clara swallowed hard. "Thank you. You don't owe me thanks." He picked up the apples again. "Just take the day slow. Let the land settle around you." Something in his tone, gentle, steady, felt like the first drop of rain falling on soil long dried. She nodded. "I'll try." The morning passed with calm whispers of work. Clara helped Martha knead dough, her hands still shaky but steadier than before. The kitchen filled with warm smells of bread, coffee, and with burning under the stove. Outside the window, the ranch stretched wide. Fences, grazing cattle, dust rising like soft breath under the sun. Clara watched Elias saddle a horse, moving with quiet rhythm, as though each motion held its own story. She wondered what hurt he carried beneath his steady voice. During lunch, another ranch hand approached her cautiously. "Miss Clara, sorry about Duke earlier," he muttered. "He gets mean when he feels small." Clara nodded. "I understand." Elias glanced over from the doorway, eyes lingering on her for a heartbeat, not checking on her, just making sure she wasn't shrinking under someone else's shadow again. She straightened her shoulders. When evening came, the sky burned gold, and the wind carried the smell of hay and saddle leather. Lanterns glowed warm along the porch. A single rider approached, dust trailing behind his horse. He dismounted, tying the reins with tense hands. He knocked on the post. "Elias," he called. "Got something you ought to hear." Elias stepped out. "Evening, Tom." "What's wrong?" Tom shifted uneasily. "Word spreading in town." He glanced at Clara, then lowered his voice. "They're saying she threw herself at you." The wind fell still, and Clara felt the world tilt under her feet. The morning sun stretched pale light across the ranch as Clara carried a small basket of eggs toward the porch. She paused when she heard low voices near the water trough. Two ranch hands leaned against the fence, their boots dusty, their hats tilted forward to block the glare. "Town's buzzing again," one muttered. "Saw Tom ride in last night. Brought fresh talk." The second spat into the dirt. "About her?" "About her," the first repeated. "They're saying she forced Elias to take her in. Callan, her desperate, lazy, unwanted." Clara froze. The words struck like sharp stones. Her chest tightened. "Foolish talk," the second man said, though his tone held uncertainty. "Elias don't get forced into anything. That ain't stopping the gossip." The first sighed. Folks always need someone to point at. Clara stepped back before they saw her, the basket trembling in her hands. She turned toward the barn, the world blurring at the edges. The sounds of morning, horses snorting, chickens scratching, wind brushing against the hay, faded behind the thrum of her heartbeat. Inside the barn, dim light filtered through wooden slats. Dust drifted like soft snow in the beams of sun. Clara sank onto a straw bale, pressed her shawl to her mouth, and let the tears fall. The gossip ripped open wounds she thought had begun to heal. Every cruel whisper from her past rushed back with sharp edges. Bootsteps sounded at the doorway. Clara stiffened, quickly wiping her face, but the hay rustled as someone approached. She kept her eyes down. Elias stopped a short distance from her. He didn't touch her or speak right away. He simply sat on a nearby bale, elbows resting loosely on his knees, letting the quiet settle between them. After a long moment, he said softly, "Barns usually where folks come when they don't want to be seen." Clara swallowed. "I didn't know anyone would follow." "I didn't follow," Elias replied. "I noticed you left the porch without the eggs." She let out a shaky breath. "They're saying awful things again." Elias stared at the floorboards. "I heard. They think I forced you," she whispered. "They think I begged my way in. That I'm nothing." His brow tightened. "Clara, they call me lazy," she said, voice cracking. "Unwanted. They don't even know me. People who speak cruelly often fear what they don't understand." Elias said, "Fear makes them loud. Loud makes them wrong." Clara gripped her shawl tighter. "Why does it hurt so much?" "Because you're the kind who listens," he said gently. "And the kind who listens has a soft heart." Clara's tears slowed. His calm steadiness felt like shelter from a storm she had no words for. "I don't want you dragged into this," she whispered. "I'm not dragged anywhere," Elias said, tone steady. "I choose where I stand." She looked up at him, just for a moment. His face, half lit by the barn's soft glow, held no judgment, only quiet understanding. "Take your time," he murmured. "Barn safe." Elias stood and checked a bridle hanging nearby, giving her room to breathe but staying close enough that she didn't feel alone. Clara wiped her eyes and inhaled deeply. The barn smelled of hay, horses, and soil, a steady scent that always made her feel grounded. "I should get back to work," she finally said. Elias nodded. "Work helps the mind settle." He left her with those simple words, and Clara followed a few minutes later. The rest of the morning unfolded slowly. Martha handed Clara a mixing bowl and smiled warmly. "Let's make bread," she said. "Good for the hands and the heart." Clara kneaded dough beside her, the rhythm calming her breathing. Martha hummed an old tune, letting Clara work without questions. Later, Clara walked the corral with 2 buckets. A pair of horses lifted their heads, ears twitching as she approached. She whispered softly to them, gentle encouragement, steady as warm wind. She guided them to water, brushing their necks as they drank. "Thank you, miss," one ranch hand called. "Saves us time." Clara nodded, surprised by the gratitude. She didn't answer, but her steps felt steadier. By afternoon, she found a broken hinge on the barn door. She picked it up, examined it, and searched the tool shelf until she found a replacement. As she knelt to fix it, Elias walked by. "You do repairs too?" he asked. She shrugged shyly. "My father never fixed things." "Someone had to." Elias's eyes softened. "Useful hands," he said. "This ranch appreciates that." Clara felt warmth bloom quietly inside her. Responsibility replaced fear bit by bit. Her movements grew more confident, her voice steadier. She no longer hovered at the edges of the ranch. She stepped into small tasks with purpose. Martha noticed. "You're glowing today," she remarked during supper prep. "Am I?" Clara asked. "Sun rises slow," Martha said, smiling. "But it rises." Clara felt the truth of that settle through her like warm light. Elias entered the kitchen to fill a kettle. He glanced at Clara, nodding once, simple, respectful, steady. She met his eyes for the first time that day and didn't look away. "Thank you," she murmured. "For what?" he asked. "For—" she hesitated. not letting their words decide things. Elias lifted the kettle. Words only have the weight you give them. Her breath caught at the quiet wisdom in his tone. Evening settled across the ranch. Lanterns glowed along the porch. Bats fluttered in the dusky sky, and the breeze carried the scent of sage. Clara stood near the railing, watching the horizon fade into purple shadow. For the first time in days, she felt a small measure of peace. Then hoofbeats approached. A young rider galloped toward the house, dust flying behind him. He slid off his horse and hurried up the steps, breathless. "Letter for Elias," he called. Elias stepped outside. "What's the trouble?" The boy handed him an envelope stamped with the sheriff's seal. Elias opened it as the lantern flame flickered between them. His jaw tightened. He looked at Clara. "This is from the sheriff," he said quietly. "He's demanding you return home immediately." Clara's breath stopped. The sheriff rode into the Hart Ranch just after noon, dust rising behind his horse in a harsh cloud. Clara stood near the porch holding a small pail, her hands trembling when she saw him dismount with a scowl. His boots hit the ground hard, the sound sharp as splitting wood. "There you are," he barked. "You've caused enough trouble, girl." Clara lowered her gaze, the heat of humiliation crawling up her neck. The ranch hands paused their work, watching in uneasy silence. The sheriff marched toward her. "You think you can hide out here? Your family wants you home. Town's tired of your nonsense." Clara swallowed hard. "I wasn't hiding," she whispered. "Don't talk back." He grabbed her arm. "You're coming with me." She winced at the pressure of his grip. Old shame rising like a storm inside her. Her breath hitched, until she heard steady footsteps behind her. "That's enough," Elias said. The sheriff turned, annoyance flashing in his eyes. "This ain't your business, Hart." Elias stepped between them, removing the sheriff's hand from Clara's arm with calm precision. "It is now." "She's a burden," the sheriff snapped. "An embarrassment to her family. She has no place here." Clara's chest tightened, but Elias didn't flinch. "She stays." The sheriff scoffed. "You took keen responsibility for her?" Elias's voice remained level. "I'm giving her space to breathe. That's all." "Ridiculous," the sheriff growled. "This woman ruins everything she touches." Clara felt the words cut deep, but she also saw the ranch hands moving behind Elias, Sam, Martha, Duke, even those who had doubted her. They stood shoulder to shoulder, quiet as stone. "You heard me," Elias said. "She stays." The sheriff glared at the group. "You all agree with this foolishness?" Sam spoke first. "She ain't harmed anyone." Martha wiped her hands on her apron. "Girl's just trying to live." Another ranch hand muttered, "World's got bigger problems than a woman seeking peace." The sheriff looked stunned, as if expecting mockery instead of unity. "You're making a mistake," he said, pointing at Clara. "Town's talking already." "Let them talk," Elias replied. The sheriff's jaw clenched. "You'll regret this, Hart." Elias tilted his hat slightly. "I reckon I'll decide that myself." For a long moment, only the wind moved through the ranch yard. Finally, with a frustrated huff, the sheriff swung onto his horse. "This ain't over," he warned before riding off. Dust trailing behind him, Clara stood frozen, her knees weak. She had never seen anyone defend her so plainly, so publicly. Elias turned to her. "You all right?" She tried to speak, but only a shaky breath came out. "He called me?" "I heard," Elias said softly. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "You've no reason to be sorry." Her eyes shimmered, emotions tangled inside her. "Why did you stand up for me?" Elias looked toward the path where the sheriff had vanished. "Because cruelty shouldn't go unanswered." Clara blinked, stunned by the depth of his calm certainty. "People don't choose me," she murmured. "Not in front of others." He studied her carefully. "They should have." Silence settled between them, warm and fragile. The ranch hands eventually drifted back to their work, though many cast reassuring glances her way. Martha approached with a soft pat on Clara's arm. "Come inside when you're ready. I'll make tea." Clara nodded, though her feet remained rooted to the ground. Elias waited a moment longer before speaking again. "Clara." She lifted her eyes. "You're safe here." Her heartbeat stumbled. She didn't know how to answer, but the words wrapped around her like a gentle blanket. Elias stepped back, hands resting at his belt. "Let the sheriff bark as he pleases. He won't be taking you from this place." Clara wiped a tear from her cheek. "I don't want to cause trouble." "You're not trouble," Elias said simply. The wind moved lightly across the yard, lifting the edges of Clara's shawl. She looked at the barn, the porch, the field stretching like quiet promises. For the first time, the ranch felt not just kind, but solid beneath her feet. Elias studied her with a steady gaze. "Clara," he said at last, his tone gentler than she'd ever heard from a man, "do you want to stay for good?" Clara's breath trembled as she searched his face, trying to understand the offer beneath his calm words. The question felt larger than the moment, stretching into every lonely place she had carried for years. She touched the porch rail to steady herself, feeling the warm grain beneath her fingertips. "I don't know what staying means," she whispered. Elias nodded slowly, as if giving her all the time she needed. The sun settled low behind him, casting long shadows across the ranch, waiting with them for her answer. She breathed again. The sun rose gold over the Hart Ranch, spilling light across fences, barns, and the grazing cattle. Clara carried buckets of water to the trough, the wooden handles smooth beneath her hands. Her steps felt lighter than they had in weeks. For the first time, she moved without the shadow of shame pressing her shoulders downward. "Morning, Miss Clara," called Emily, a small girl with shy eyes who often visited the ranch. She clutched a rag doll as she watched Clara fill the water trough. "Good morning, Emily," Clara said, smiling gently. The girl's tiny hand waved timidly, then ran to follow her. Emily's voice piped up from behind. "Your laugh. It sounds like the warm fire home." Clara blinked and laughed softly, the sound rolling through the barnyard. It surprised her, how easy it felt, how it didn't echo with judgment. "A warm fire?" she asked, turning to see the child's bright eyes. "Yes," Emily insisted. "Not hot, but safe. Happy." Clara knelt to brush a strand of hair from the girl's face. "Then I hope it always sounds like that, Emily." Elias emerged from the barn doorway, tipping his hat. He watched silently for a moment, taking in Clara's soft laugh and Emily's delighted expression. His eyes held a quiet pride, careful not to intrude, but noticing each small victory she claimed. "Breakfast will be ready soon," Martha called from the kitchen. "Come eat while it's hot." Clara nodded and carried the empty buckets back to the barn, feeling the solid rhythm of work beneath her hands and feet. Each chore was simple, but it grounded her, teaching her that honest labor carried its own quiet dignity. As she walked across the yard, she noticed the breeze lifting her shawl from her shoulders. For the first time in a long while, she didn't cling to it as armor. She let it fall freely, brushing against her arms. From the porch, a pair of men on horseback paused, their boots heavy in the stirrups. They called out, laughing cruelly, "Well, look at the big girl. Hart's taking anyone he pleases now." Clara's stomach tightened. She glanced at Elias, who remained calm, his hand resting near the reins of a nearby horse. "Get out of here," he said quietly, but his tone carried a firmness that left no room for argument. The men scoffed, exchanged a glance, and rode off, dust spiraling in their wake. Clara exhaled slowly, amazed at the quiet protection surrounding her. She had feared ridicule, but she learned that strength could come from steadiness, not noise. Martha appeared at her side with a basket of bread. "Don't let the town's mouth shape your heart," she said softly. "You're more than their words." Clara's fingers brushed the warm bread. I'm starting to understand that." Later, she led a pair of horses to water, speaking softly to them. Their eyes followed her every move, trusting, patient. The ranch became a rhythm of work and care. Every task completed, every small kindness offered, stitched confidence into her heart. Emily returned, tugging at Clara's skirt. "Show me how you do it," she said. "Teach me how to feed them without scaring them." Clara knelt beside the child, guiding her small hands over the horse's muzzle. "Gentle, just gentle," she whispered. Emily mimicked her movements, and the horse leaned into the careful touch. You see, Clara said, kindness works better than force. Emily beamed. I want to be like you. Clara laughed again, the sound warm and easy. She realized she hadn't thought about her size, her past humiliation, or her shame all morning. For the first time, she felt free to simply exist without apology. Elias watched from the porch, the hat shadowing his eyes. He never commented, never intervened unless necessary. But every step Clara took, every small triumph, seemed to earn his quiet acknowledgement. His respect wasn't loud. It was steady, unyielding, and entirely hers to accept. By afternoon, she joined Martha in repairing a fence post, driving nails with careful precision. Her hands were calloused, her shirt dusted with hay, and her cheeks flushed. She felt the heat in her body, not from shame, but from exertion, from living fully in the day. One of the ranch hands approached. You're settling in real good, Miss Clara, he said. Haven't seen anyone take to the ranch like you. Clara nodded, a small smile touching her lips. I think I'm learning where I belong. The wind lifted again, carrying the scent of sage and distant horses. She looked toward the horizon, toward the wide, open land that stretched farther than the eye could see. It felt like it belonged to her as much as it did anyone, a quiet space to breathe, to grow. Evening came, lanterns glowing softly along the porch and barn. Clara stood near the railing, watching the cattle graze in the fading light. Emily's laughter echoed from the yard, chasing her shadows away. Elias joined her, leaning lightly against the railing. They'll come by soon, he said, nodding toward the horizon. Clara frowned. The town? He nodded slowly. They've heard about you. They'll want to talk. Judge. Mock. Clara felt a flutter of fear, but it no longer rooted her to the ground. I think I can face it, she said quietly. I've learned strength can be quiet. Elias's shadowed eyes met hers. That's right. Quiet can hold more weight than noise ever could. She smiled softly, feeling the truth in his words. Her shoulders lifted, her heart steady. For the first time, she believed she belonged somewhere on this earth. And as the distant dust swirled over the road, she knew the storm of judgment might still come, but she would rise above it, rising from the dust, stronger than she ever imagined. Just beyond the horizon, a rider's dust cloud hinted at approaching news. The wind carried the weight of the town's curiosity. Clara inhaled the evening air and tightened her shawl, not as armor, but as a reminder that she was learning to stand firmly, no matter what came. The quiet ranch waited with her, ready to hold her steady for whatever would follow. The town hall was crowded, the air thick with dust and murmurs. Wooden benches creaked under the weight of townsfolk who had gathered to witness the latest scandal. Clara stood near the back at first, her fingers gripping the edges of her shawl. Each whisper brushed against her like the wind in dry grass, mocking, curious, sharp. Here she is, someone muttered. The girl heart took in. She's out of place, another added. Can't be right. Clara's stomach tightened, but she forced herself to take slow breaths. Elias's hand rested lightly on her elbow, guiding her toward the front. His presence was steady, quiet, unwavering. The crowd's attention shifted as they noticed him. Tall and calm, a man who carried authority without shouting. The sheriff rose in the front, boots scraping against the wooden floor. Miss Boone, he barked, voice slicing through the murmurs. You are to return home immediately. You have no business here, and this man, he gestured at Elias, should not be sheltering you. It is clear he chooses you out of pity. Gasps and murmurs rippled through the room. Clara's cheeks warmed, but it was not shame that burned. It was anger, mingled with disbelief that anyone still believed the lies. She looked at Elias, searching for guidance. His eyes met hers, calm, steady, protective. Pity? Elias's voice was quiet, but each word struck the hall like a hammer on an iron gate. You think I chose her out of pity? He stepped closer, placing a hand gently on Clara's shoulder, letting the world see his choice. No, I chose her because she is strong. She is decent. She is hard-working. And she is braver than any of you who hide behind gossip and whispers. The crowd froze. The sheriff's lips pressed in. A few townsfolk shifted uneasily in their seats. Clara felt her pulse quicken, not with fear, but with rising strength. The words wrapped around her, steady and warm like sunlight over plains. "You've known her for years," Elias continued, his voice calm but deliberate. "Yet you mocked her, whispered about her, judged her before you even tried to see her heart. That ends today." Clara's hands fell from her shawl. She drew in a deep breath, letting the air fill her chest. She could feel the weight of the years she had carried. The laughter, the cruelty, the isolation, slipping away in the light of his words. A murmur ran through the crowd, hesitant and unsure. The sheriff cleared his throat, but no one echoed him. Elias's quiet authority held the room, steady as the mountains beyond the town. "Look at her," Elias said softly, turning Clara so the crowd could see her. She stood taller than she had in years, shoulders squared, eyes bright with restrained emotion. She works. She laughs. She helps. She survives. And she does all of this with more courage than any of you can claim while hiding behind judgment. Clara's lips trembled. She wanted to speak, but her voice caught in her throat. Elias did not rush her. He simply let the truth of her presence speak. "I have no use for townsfolk who spread lies," Elias added, "and I have no interest in anyone who refuses to see another human being as worthy. Clara Boone is worthy. This is my word. Let it stand." A heavy silence settled over the hall. The sheriff's mouth opened, then closed. The whispers died, replaced by the quiet realization that the crowd had been wrong. Those who had laughed before now shifted uneasily, caught in the truth that had arrived quietly, firmly, without spectacle. Clara felt her breath return in steady waves. For the first time, she was not shrinking under the weight of others' eyes. She was not the girl who ran from shame. She was a woman standing beside a man who had chosen her, and in doing so, she was choosing herself. "Thank you," she whispered, almost inaudibly, but Elias heard. He nodded, a gentle curve of his mouth, his hand still resting lightly on her shoulder. That simple touch carried more affirmation than any speech could. Martha and the ranch hands arrived just outside the doorway, hats in hands, watching the scene with quiet pride. Emily peeked from the back, her small eyes wide with wonder. Clara's heart swelled at the sight. She was not alone, not anymore. The sheriff finally stomped from the hall, muttering threats about consequences and law. The townsfolk did not follow him. They lingered, caught between embarrassment and the sudden respect forced upon them by Elias's words. Clara exhaled fully, letting the air carry away the last of her fear. The hall no longer felt suffocating. It felt small, contained, a space in which she had reclaimed herself. Elias guided her toward the door, his hand firm yet gentle. The afternoon sun spilled over the streets, golden and forgiving. Clara squinted against the brightness, feeling the warmth on her face. She had walked through whispers, cruelty, and doubt, and she had emerged not broken, but whole. The ranch awaited her, the place where work and care had rebuilt her, where quiet kindness had been stronger than mockery. She knew she belonged there, fully, without apology or hesitation. "Come on," Elias said softly. "Let's get back home." Clara followed, each step measured and steady. Her shawl drifted lightly in the breeze, no longer a shield but a symbol of the journey she had traveled. The townspeople's whispers faded behind her, replaced by the soft rustle of wind through the streets and the distant lowing of cattle. She glanced at Elias. I never thought I'd feel like this," she said. "You mean safe?" he asked. She nodded, and proud, and like I belong somewhere. He smiled faintly, his hand brushing her shoulder once more. "You always did. You just needed the right place to see it." They walked together into the sun, the golden light stretching across the horizon. Clara's chest felt light, her heart steady. For the first time, she saw herself without judgment, without fear, without shame. She was not the girl who had fled the altar, nor the one whispered about by the town. She was Clara Boone, a woman reclaimed by dignity, hope, and quiet love. The morning air carried the scent of sage and earth. She inhaled deeply, feeling it fill her lungs and heart. The town lay behind her now, and the ranch stretched ahead, open and forgiving. With Elias at her side, Clara stepped fully into the sunrise, knowing her life had finally begun.